All right. Well, welcome to the Smoke Pit. Today we are going to talk to Brandon Sodergren. He is a Marine veteran and an avid Trump supporter, and we're going to talk a little bit about the taboo subject of politics and the election, and sort of what's been going on in the past few weeks since the elections happened, and as things are unfolding and developing, I guess depending on which camp you're in, as far as what side you lean politically, maybe you've heard of what's going on, maybe you haven't, but we're just here to talk about some things that are some potential possibilities, and talk a little bit about what a Biden administration would mean, and maybe what a continuation of a Trump administration would mean for the country, and yeah, I guess we'll see what happens. This is the first time we've delved into the topic of politics, so we welcome all points of view. We want to hear all points of view, and today we have Brandon on. So Brandon, thank you so much for being on. I appreciate it. You can go ahead.
Thanks, bro.
Yeah, no worries, man. Go ahead and tell everyone a little bit about yourself. Just give like a brief, a little bio.
All right. Well, let's see. I'm originally from Mid-Coast, Maine. I grew up in a small town called Waldoboro. It's just a small fisherman town, mostly lobster. And I graduated high school there. And then I went to college for about a year at a community college, enlisted in the Marine Corps. I was in the reserves for 6 years, and I ended up deploying to Iraq in 2008, 2009. I was Al Anbar province. I was on Al Assad Air Base. And then in 2011, I deployed again. This time was Afghanistan. And I was Helmand province on Camp Leatherneck that time around. And we got home a little after Christmas, just in time to celebrate New Year's in San Diego, California. We demobbed out of Pendleton. And then I got out of the Marine Corps, and, well, I dropped the IRR, that is, in 2012. Final honorable discharge, 2014. Then I went back to school. I got my associates in criminal justice and my bachelor's in criminology. I got to study abroad in Ireland, Sweden, see how they do things over there, how they govern, how they write laws and take care of their criminals, that sort of stuff. And I worked a little bit in corrections at the county level and the state prison level. It wasn't really my cup of tea. And so after that, I eventually I moved down here to Kentucky. Now I have a family. And so that's basically, in a nutshell, Brandon Sodergren. I'm originally from Maine, but I now reside in the capital of Frankfort, Kentucky. And I currently am an employee at Amazon.
Oh, nice. What do you do at Amazon?
I work in customer returns.
Okay, so you're the guy that we have to all scream and yell at if we don't if we don't.
Actually, I don't answer the phone. I do the warehouse portion of it. I process the actual customer return. I
Gotcha.
do read the comments though, so if you put a comment in there, I'll read that.
Well, you know where to find him, Brandon Sodergren. Go ahead and leave him a nasty gram. All right, man. So let's just jump right into it. We've got quite the dilemma on our hands. I think as a country, we're at a really pivotal point. And I guess, again, depending on where you sit on the fence, you might look at this certain way. So here we have a guy, Joe Biden, who the mainstream media has dubbed the president-elect. And, as the situation's unfolding, at least the people on the right I'm not so sure how much people are paying attention on the left, but the people on the right are starting to learn that, okay, some of these norms that we thought were norms maybe aren't so much norms. Um, you know, the technicalities that we thought were technicalities aren't so. And specifically, I'm just talking about some of these traditional dates that we're sort of, I guess, programmed to think that, if things don't happen by such and such a date, then we are, endowed to, this particular candidate who's now going to be the president elect. But as it's coming from the conservative side of the house, we're starting to see that, okay, there's been a lot of petitions, lawsuits, and things of the like, that are starting to challenge this idea. And, you know, where we go from here, I don't know. I don't know if you know. I don't know if anybody knows. But if you could maybe explain or give your point of view on sort of where we're at as far as, I guess, choosing a president.
Yeah, and I think that's an answer most, uh, I would say, level-minded Americans want to know, and not to take a shot at these people that are kind of kicking back. Well, it's all over. Joe Biden's president. Move on, right? MoveOn.org. Um, because I tell you right now, I can recall 2016. I don't ever recall them accepting President Trump as the president. I don't even recall Hillary Clinton conceding. She may have. I can't really remember though. I don't recall it. And she didn't even go out to her supporters that night to tell them, "Hey, go to bed." This is just the hypocrisy from the left that drives me absolutely insane. They want to sit there and say it's time for us to move on. He needs to concede when there are affidavits out there for election fraud. Now, for those, if there are any liberals listening or anybody that are kind of shaking their head or rolling their eyes right now, an affidavit is evidence. It's a sworn testimony. Someone raises their hand and says, "I swear to tell the truth." And guess what? If they're caught in the lie, they go to jail. So these are big deals. This is not just, oh, it's a conspiracy theory, as a lot of people want to make some of these things out to be. But how do we pick our next president? If Joe Biden honestly won this election, I will be the first one to say, okay, he won. Let's move on. And hey, maybe President Trump can run again in 2024. But I am not convinced. And it's not because of my political bias. It's because of all the things I've seen. And quite honestly, Scott, I think our biggest enemies right now are the big tech companies. They are obviously the liberal news media and all left-leaning politicians. They want to silence us. They don't want our voices being heard. If someone mentions anything about election fraud on Twitter or Facebook, they're being censored, they're being silenced or thrown in Facebook jail, or I mean, we've seen it all the time. But you see the same things happening to people on the left? You really don't.
Yeah,
But
I think you have a really good point, especially as far as obviously the media and the big tech giants. Like, even YouTube just put out a policy, I believe yesterday. Um, I don't know if they said that they were going to full out ban content that relates to the 2020 election, but basically they're going to put something similar to Twitter's doing and Facebook, where they put that little banner that down there at the bottom, and it it basically gives you sort of their little spiel on the election and where we're at, and then Joe Biden's the president elect, and I think they've done themselves a disservice, and again, whether you're on the right or the left, I don't even think it really matters. These platforms are there for people to explore. It's an extension of the First Amendment, right? Like, or at least it should be. I guess that's how I view it. Is you have these platforms that should be open, and with some restriction, right? Because we don't want people threatening people's lives on there, right? There's certain obvious things that would violate that, but they're there really for for the exchange of ideas and to be able to search and hear different viewpoints, whether you deem them crazy, whether you deem them credible, whatever it is. I mean, you want that, right? And so um I think, especially in the lead up to this, even going into COVID, even something that's not necessarily particularly election related. I mean, you're just seeing a lot of this. I'll call it interference, by these people who, um, you know, are essentially classifying whatever it is that they're reading as X, Y, and Z. And so it's a who makes that determination and based on what, and that's a dangerous thing, right? Because what you see is not what I see, and what I see is not what that person sees. And if I'm just left to being the arbiter, then it just goes my way. And it seems that the big tech companies are really, obviously they're left leaning, and they're trying to cancel out sort of that conservative voice. And I think that's dangerous for the country. And I do think that it's one of the reasons why we're in the position we're in, because it also extends out into the media as well. And so I don't know where we go from here. I know there's been a big push, and maybe you can touch on that, with this
Right.
this this movement by the Trump administration to try to take away these. I think what is it, the 203, section 203, that they're sort of petitioning to get rid of.
Yeah, you see, the problem with a lot of Trump's lawsuits that he's filed, every time I've turned around in every state, these judges are just denying them, and some of them were even judges he has appointed. Um, he appointed a record amount of judges during his 4-year tenure, and it what blows my mind is it's like it's not just they're willing to not see what's
Why do you
going
think?
on
Why do
with
you
the
think that
cases.
is?
I mean, to be honest, I think they have a lot of pressure from. I think everything from the big tech companies to the media. I mean, there was just a report just the other day saying China. I mean, this has been going on for a while, but it's finally out there in the media now. China has spies out. They go to the CEOs of all these big corporations. Obviously, the big tech companies have been in business with them forever, and politicians, particularly. And they're putting pressure on them. And why are they putting pressure on them? They want them to pass laws and legislation and do things that benefit China. Now, as far as Trump's uh, cases and lawsuits, I mean, I don't really know. It doesn't seem like they're going anywhere right now. Rudy Giuliani just got COVID 19, but they say he's better now. If you want my personal opinion, I don't think there's a better lawyer you could have in your corner. The guy took down the Italian mafia in New York. He cleaned up New York City, and he was very strong, standing with President Bush after 9/11. However, I'm taking it from a different perspective because, to be honest, I've thought about almost throwing in the towel the last week or two in this whole election. But there's just a little. You ever? It's almost like you want to give up hope, but there's that little bit of you that's saying, "No, I'm not going to do it." And I had that. And then there's Texas. This could be huge. I'm going to put the word could in there because I don't want to do a big celebratory laugh already prematurely. But Texas, what's happening in Texas could very well overturn the election. And not only is it Texas, but we have 17, and now I hear 20 other states jumping on board with Texas. These are all states that Trump won. Now, you have the Attorney General, Ken Paxton. He is suing Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Georgia. Now, people will ask, what's he suing them for? Okay, Biden won those states, right? So, in order to, this is something that, quite honestly, I didn't even think about until I heard not too long ago. To complete a lawsuit, you have to show some sort of damages on your side, right? So Texas has to prove that they're suffering some sort of damages from what these states did. Well, what did they do, you might ask? Well, obviously the opponents are saying it's a mockery of the court and it's a publicity stunt, but this is ultimately what they're suing on, and it makes sense if you listen to it or even read it. So they're suing them because the states that I mentioned, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Georgia, they changed their rules and regulations and or laws on voting without legislation. Now, some people may shrug it off and say, so what? You're not supposed to do that. If you change the way you vote in your state, you have to change it with your legislature. You can't just change the rules last minute and go with it. And apparently that's what they did. And the Constitution, Amendment 14, comes into play with a lot of this. And so in order for the states to have any, I don't know. This is just, we all know what's going on with the Electoral College. But, so, when you ask Texas, okay, how does it hurt you? What damages did you suffer, you might ask? Well, I don't think Texas is the only victim here, because obviously you got all these other states jumping on board. Their voters are suffering. And the result of the election is obviously going to impact this country. And I'm going to tell you one last thing. I don't want to ramble too long, but these people that say, well, it doesn't matter who's president. It don't affect me. It's not going to change anything. These people drive me absolutely crazy because, come on, we have seen what will happen if Joe Biden does indeed get the White House. Not just his gun laws and all of that. He wants to tear down the wall. He wants to close Guantanamo Bay, with all those 9/11 terrorists and everybody in there. He wants to raise taxes. And he thinks magically when he goes in there, he's going to get rid of this COVID-19 pandemic by mandating masks for 100 days. And, we're going to open the schools. Everything's just going to be fine now that the evil Trump is out. Well, I think even people that voted for him damn well know that that's just not reality.
Do you think the people that supported him with their vote, do you think that they voted for his policies, or do you think that they voted for him out of their hatred for the current sitting president, President Trump?
I'm going to go with an 80-20. I think 80% voted for him due to the fact they could not stand Donald Trump. And it's not the fact they couldn't stand his politics. It's the fact they couldn't stand his demeanor and the way he talks, because he does not conduct himself in a political matter. He conducts himself as he did before when he was a businessman. We've never seen anything like this in the history of this country. We have never seen a president act like a businessman. Even President Ronald Reagan, I love to quote him all the time, said, "How can a president not be an actor?" when he was criticized because he was an actor when he was in office. Because, with all due respect, being a politician, you are acting. You're putting on a show. It's theater, and you have to sell yourself to the voters, to the American people. Donald J. Trump does not do that. Donald Trump, though he is a businessman and he probably has had to make deals and look good, he is honest and brutally honest. And he will tell you exactly what's on his mind. He will name call with no remorse. And to some people, they find that harsh. But I think to many blue collar, hard working Americans, they find that refreshing because he's not fake. And so, yeah, I don't know. I think the reason why a lot of people voted for sleepy Joe Biden was because of they despise Donald Trump, not because they like Biden.
Well, I think from the people that I've talked to who don't support President Trump, that's one of their biggest you know issues with him is how he conducts himself. Um, but at the same time, I think because I think there's some truth to that, right? Where it's like, okay,
Absolutely.
I can see where people wouldn't latch onto this guy because of the way he acts at times and some of the things he says. I think, but at the same time, I think a point that you make that I think is also correct is that to some people that's really refreshing, right? And so like they almost they like to see that because it gives a sense of, hey, this guy's just like me, right? Like because many of us, especially those of us who are in the military, right? Like the things that we've heard in our years of service have been, you've heard it all, right? Like you've heard all the craziest things, you've seen some of the craziest things, and I don't mean combat. I'm just saying, just in general, as far as your daily duties and things like that. I mean, you're hearing that locker room banter all the time, and there is a sense of normalcy to that, at least in our community. Um, but there's people who really do latch on to that and like, yeah, like this guy's normal, right? Like, and you hear that he's the blue collar billionaire. So I think it's interesting. But I mean, even me personally, like I have a very hard time believing that a guy in Joe Biden, who didn't really campaign almost at all, um, he somehow gets 80 plus million votes. And that's not a small number, right? Like that like destroys Obama's by like I think like
Even Obama.
17 million. And listen, if you obviously are a Trump supporter, you're probably not a big Obama guy, but you can't deny the fact that the guy created a huge movement, right? He was a fantastic speaker. He energized the Democratic Party to the likes of which we've never seen, right? Um, and you have a guy like Joe Biden who, I mean, I guess I guess the idea is that you picked up 17 million votes based on hate. Um, and that I don't know, that's a tough sell for me. That's a tough sell, and I think anybody who can at least look at that objectively, left, right, center, doesn't matter. It's just a really hard sell if you really think about that. And you have a guy like President Trump who is akin to President Obama in the same way in which he drives a ton of energy into the party, right? Like he can turn out a massive crowd. I mean, he can really just galvanize a group of people in his base. And he ended up turning out, I think 74 million or something like that, which was, I don't know how much over it was last time. What was it? 10 million more than he did the first time around or something like that. Um, I don't know. That's a really hard sell. And listen, I don't know how much fraud there was or wasn't. Like, I'm not sitting here I don't have the evidence in front of me. I don't have it mounted up. But I think if you just take a look objectively, you're like, all right, let's weigh these things. Like, I don't know. It doesn't seem to add up. What are your thoughts?
It really doesn't. I I find it hard to believe that Joe Biden crushed not just Trump's votes but Obama's. And I agree with you with everything you said about President Obama. I may not have been a fan of his policies, but the guy knew how to speak. He knew how to get votes. He knew how to draw crowds. And I'm going to say something that I heard not too long ago on Dan Bongino's podcast. He raised a real good point because, this guy had an interesting perspective being a Secret Service agent during the Obama administration. He basically said the first time around when Obama was elected, he said it in this sense, I believe, he didn't really have to try to get elected because it wasn't just the fact that people were so moved about having the first African American president. It was the fact that he appeared very moderate when he first ran for president. And I don't think a lot of people remember that. When he first ran, remember he ran against Hillary Clinton in the primary and beat her? He was ultra liberal left and he was more moderate. He appeared moderate and he did a good job of fooling people that he was moderate. But really, once he got in there and when he ran for re-election, he appeared more towards the liberal side. And when you look at his history, a lot of his idols are socialists, and he studied socialism and communism and almost like looked up to it in a sense. Now, am I saying that he is a complete socialist? No, but a lot of the things he did, are very, very socialistic. Socialized medicine, the whole Obamacare, and I don't think a lot of people expected him to get us more into the mess with in the Middle East as far as Iraq and Afghanistan. But were you in during his administration?
Who, Obama?
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Okay.
got in 2008.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Because I was in from '06 to 12, and I was actually in Iraq when Obama was elected, and we went from being able to kick in doors to having to do cordon knocks. I mean, it's just I saw that perspective from the military aspect, but more or less coming home, the recession, and when all that happened, of course, Obama blamed it all on Bush. Everything was Bush's fault until Trump came along. But to be honest, as far as where we're sitting right now, I I hope I really hope that the Supreme Court has the courage to take on this this case that Texas is leading on, and then all these other states are following on now. Because let me tell you something: how huge was Amy Coney Barrett now? I mean, all these people were. Why do you think the Democrats were so dead set against President Trump nominating her? Because of something like this that's happening right now. If the Supreme Court sees this, I think Trump wins. And so the two scenarios, the only ones I really see playing out, I could be wrong, is the Supreme Court or it going to the state legislature. And if it goes to all the state legislatures, it's majority GOP, and the Republicans will elect Trump. I don't know if it's going to come down to that, but I say worst case scenario is if Sleepy Joe gets away with the steal, because I do believe there was fraud. I really do. There's just too many affidavits, too many evidence. There's video footage down in Georgia of all that shenanigans that went on, and then they tried to cover it up. But worst case scenario, if Sleepy Joe does get away with it, Trump can run in 2024. But I mean, I don't know. It's almost at the point now where I think if Biden does go through and get in as president-elect, I don't think Americans will trust the voting systems anymore. Everything from Dominion, the electronic voting systems, to, all the suspected fraud. If you go through any of the other presidential elections, have you ever seen this many accusations of fraud? This isn't Donald Trump just, refusing to concede. These are hundreds upon thousands of Americans that are saying, hey, something's not right here.
So I want to kind of take that and move into two scenarios, really. With all the civil unrest that we've seen over the past, I guess 2 years, predominantly, you have two things, right? Like, you have only two options in the sense of, you have, okay, either Joe Biden's going to be the president, or you're going to have a continuation of the Trump presidency. And I think if Trump does maintain the office of the president, and this comes out of nowhere, because it's not really. I've tried to look recently. I actually have been off all news sites altogether. I haven't watched the news. I haven't looked at any news sites, not center, not left, not right. I'm pretty much. I have taken like a media blackout.
You're an intelligent guy.
Yeah, it's just too toxic at this point. But anyways, with that being said, I did take a look, and I'm trying to see, okay, what's going on, on the side of CNN and NBC, all these the left leaning outlets, and I'm looking at the couple of the right outlets the past few days, and I'm not really seeing anything being reported on the side of the left as far as what's going on with the Trump campaign and some of these lawsuits and some of these claims of voter fraud, et cetera, et cetera. So I guess the one of the scenarios is that, let's say this goes to the Supreme Court. Donald Trump is the victor per the court. He ends up getting the nomination, and he's the next president-elect officially. What are we going to see countrywide? I mean, are we going to see, an uproar and an upheaval that to the likes of we've never seen before, right? Beyond all the other protests that we've seen. We've had Chaz out there in Portland, right? Like, are we going to start seeing like, some crazy stuff like that? I mean, I'm inclined to think so. And then vice versa, it's like, okay, well, if Joe Biden gets in and everything that you're saying, as I think a lot of people that are conservative share those same sentiments that you just shared, and conservatives for the most part are pretty conservative, right? Like, they're not known for going out there and rioting and looting and things like that. So, but I do think that there's a level of anger when it comes to the conservative side, more so than we've seen, at least in recent times, right? So, like, I'm definitely expecting, if Biden gets in, I think it's pretty logical to expect some sort of uprising. I'm not talking revolution or anything like that. I'm just talking like there's going to be some sort of movement, right, to push back and quote unquote resist the way in which we've seen from the other side on the left in terms of Donald Trump. What do you see as far as those two scenarios? I mean, like, are you, do you think the country's going to go upside down if he stays in, and do you think the country's going to go upside down if Biden gets in?
Uh, that's. I think you're pretty spot on with what you just said, because I think if Joe Biden gets in, you're going to see conservatives, they're going to be pissed off. They're probably going to protest peacefully. And they're probably going to exercise their Bill of Rights. But are you going to see them burn down cities? No. Are you going to see them assault people? No. Are you going to see them, you know, assault police or say defund the police or just act like complete morons and irresponsible citizens? No, you're not. And I think that's the good news if Biden gets in. But if Donald Trump gets in, I think you're pretty much there as far as imagine. I think it's going to be like uh, Seattle, Portland, Chicago times 10 because they're going to look at it in a sense, wait, he stole the election. When they're not looking at it from a logical standpoint. They're looking at it from what the news media tells them, which are mostly lies and biased opinions. And they're going to think, wait, we elected Joe Biden and then Trump just stole it. Well, we're not going to stand for that. And the thing that really blows my mind with these morons, and I have no problem calling them that because that's what they are, is they really think they're being a revolution. They really think that they're making a difference by burning down businesses and harming innocent people. You know, people have died even. And, you know, I think police brutality is wrong. And any of these police officers that have crossed the line, yeah, they need to suffer the consequences and be penalized for it, of course. But the problem is, people have been blaming President Trump for the division of this country. I'm not going to deny the fact the country's divided, but it really doesn't have as much to do with President Trump as it does with us as citizens. What are we doing to unite? If you think about the last time we were really united, I think back to 9/11. It took a terrorist attack to really unite us because we've always had differences of opinions. You're going to have Republicans, you're going to have Democrats, you're going to have, you know, people that like the Red Sox and Yankees or Pepsi and Coke. But at the end of the day, can we sit down and have a civil conversation and shake hands? Well, yeah, for the most part, I think we always have been able to. But these past 3 to 4 years has been more violent. And it's very concerning. It's like the Make America Great Again hat on I have right now. I I live in Kentucky, where it's a red state, but I live in Frankfurt, the capital. I'd probably get harassed if I walked into a public store wearing it. You know, it's to the point now. It's like, where's your free speech? Where is the Constitution? I think the founding fathers are rolling in their graves right now because they're seeing the way we're acting towards one another. We're not acting peaceful. We're not being good Samaritans or good citizens. We're we're just shitting on one another. And I think it's got to stop because I can sit down and have a cup of coffee with a liberal as long as they're willing to be respectful. Unfortunately, I'm finding probably 8 to 9 times out of 10 they can't do it. They just can't. And I hate to say it, but I found it more so not to the fact that I'm a Republican, but the fact that I support Donald J. Trump. They absolutely despise that. And once again, I don't think it's as much to do with his policies or the actual background of the individual as much as it is his demeanor and how the media portrays President Donald J. Trump. there's a big difference between who he is and what how the media portrays him. And I think that's, I mean, I just saw a story that just came out uh, just not long ago. Um, you hear about the congressman from California, Swalwell. He,
Yeah.
there's stuff going on with him right now with a Chinese spy, that mysterious woman there. Well, out of all the things I got out of that, we don't need to like dive into that if you don't want to. But the thing that blew my mind about that whole story was the media part of it. MSNBC, 0 minutes of coverage. ABC, 0 minutes. CNN, to be fair, did cover it for 3 minutes. They interviewed him, and it was just Swalwell denying everything, saying, "Oh, I have no idea she was a spy. I don't know anything about it. See nothing, know nothing." NBC, 0 minutes. CBS, 0 minutes. Fox did a pretty extended coverage of it. So you're seeing the majority of our liberal media and our social media and our politicians, they're not telling us the truth. They're on an agenda. That, sir, that's the whole problem. I think that's a greater threat even than a terrorist attack at some point, because these Americans are being misled. It affects how they live, it affects how they vote, and everything. And it's just a disservice to this country when journalists, politicians, and social media are on agendas, and they don't just want to lie to us, they want us to spread their lies everywhere else. And then you have a broken country.
Yeah, I think you're right about the media. I think again, left or right, obviously everybody has their own bias, and it at this point it's so hard to see through. It's so hard to find the commonalities, right? If you see a story that's reported on both sides, it's sort of like a Venn diagram, right? Like you take the left, you take the right, you put them together, and you try to see that little center spot, and you try to figure out, okay, where's the overlap here? Maybe that's the truth, but it's hard, especially in the example that you're given there, when one side's covering one thing and the other side's unwilling to cover it. Well, then it's just me versus you, right? Like there's not that centerfold there where we can kind of see, okay, well, there might be some truth here because we've got some bleed over, right? Um, but I do think you're correct that the media has a large piece of this puzzle, and are responsible largely for a lot of the things that are going on. I mean, I don't know what what the solution is, but I do know that I think there's forums like this one. This one's obviously not super heavily, political, but there are ones that are, right. There are individuals, for example, even Joe Rogan, right? Like he has, Tulsi Gabbard, and he has Bernie Sanders, and he has Ben Shapiro, and he has guys like Jordan Peterson, and he got, so there is that blend, and it's a long form, format where you can actually hear out somebody for a given period of time. It's not set up to catch that 30-second or 15-second, news clip or video highlight, right? Where they can kind of placate to that, right? Or the interviewer can kind of serve up a question and let them knock it out of the park, right? Like, so I think that's what a lot of people are moving towards, and I think a lot of people are getting their information more so from the podcast realm, in the long form interview type realm, because it's just more substantive than watching the news. And I think I don't really know the numbers of the networks and all that stuff. Um, I know there's been a decline. Let's just say that, right? Like, and I think it extends to both sides, but I think that's one of the reasons why, because I think people are like, man, like screw these guys. Like whether it's Fox, whether it's CNN, people are just like, man, I'm just tired of this. Like I want to hear some sort of extended analysis, or I want to know. Everyone says this about Bernie Sanders. Well, now I can go to Joe Rogan and I can listen to 3 hours of him talk, and at least I can understand where he's coming from. Whether I agree with him, disagree with him, doesn't matter. Because you can listen to Dan Crenshaw on there, and you can go, hey, like I really agree with Dan Crenshaw on that. This marijuana policy that he talks about, I don't agree with that, right? Like, or whatever it is, right? You can actually sit there and talk about an array of ideas or array of policy positions, and then go, hey, I like that. I don't like that. I see where he's going with that. I don't know if that's really a complete idea, but I do like this from Bernie when Bernie's, like you could sort of make these comparisons and maybe establish your position a little bit more, or be opened a little bit more, and I think that's really the goal, right? That the goal is to try to find where we have commonalities versus differences, right? And that's one way in which we can unite. And that's something that, when I had Dakota on here, he had talked about extensively. Let's not try to find the differences. Let's try to find the commonalities, right? The similarities between us, and then we can unite based on that. And I think that's an important aspect. We're Americans. We want to see this country thrive, and we're passionate. And fierce debate has been a staple of our culture and society, since its inception. Fierce debate, and we fought over it,
Exactly.
but we don't need to go to war with each other. Like that's unnecessary, right? Like I don't want to see that. I'm sure you don't want to see that. I hope you don't want to see that. And I hope people on the left don't want to see that either, and I think many of them don't want to see that. But anyways,
I think people are worried about that though. But I don't think it's gonna go down that route. But yeah, I like listening to guys like Dan Bongino because he's raw and he's not afraid to say certain things. But at the same time, other conservative guys I like to watch, like Dinesh D'Souza and you said Ben Shapiro. The reason why I like those guys is they'll tour around the whole country, go to these liberal college campuses, and they're like, okay, I'll debate 12 of you at the same time and make you look like idiots. And I think that's great, because they're at least willing to sit down and talk with these people. Whereas a lot of these news media outlets, you're not going to see Bernie Sanders go on Fox. Let's face it. And you're not going to see, let's see, someone like Ted Cruz probably go on CNN or NBC. Not too awfully much. Maybe once in every blue moon, but it's going to be a battle if he does go on.
Yeah, well, I think if there's one to wrap up, I'll leave this, and then I got a question or two questions for you. But I think whether you like him or not, I think if there's one thing that I think everyone should agree on about the Trump presidency is the fact that, as ugly as it may be or may have been at times, what he has done is he has highlighted some very important issues within our government, right?
Yeah.
I think more so than ever, we're seeing the House of Cards, right? Like if you've seen that show, like we're almost seeing it in real life, right? Like we all sort of knew it was there. We all sort of knew how things. Yeah, we've known. Okay, like we understand this DC. You can call it the swamp. You can call it whatever you want. I don't really care what you call it. But we've known that there's this way that things are operated and ran, right? But now we've actually seen it's been brought to life. It's tangible now, or where we can actually see it. And I think it for both sides. I don't think this is just like for people on the right to sit on and point fingers, and I don't think it's for people on the left to point fingers. I think everyone's like, well, there's some serious issues going on in Washington, right? Like, and if nothing else, I think he's done a great job of that, whether it was directly, or a byproduct of a direct ideology or a plan that he had, or if it was just a happenstance of the scenario because of his personality and the way in which things, or how it clashes with the current state of affairs in Washington D.C. But I think that's important, and that's my take on that. But what I want to ask you, as an avid Trump supporter, I want to ask you two things. One, what do you think President Trump's biggest failure is, or failure was, if he is no longer the president so far?
Absolutely. I think that's a great question. I think his biggest failure is significantly increasing our national debt. That's number one. That's not anything any other president hasn't done, but I think it's significantly gone up, and our national deficit is something that very little people understand or want to talk about. But it's important because if we keep going down the road we're going, our kids, our grandkids, great grandkids, the American dollar, the value may be absolutely zilch, and it behooves some of you to invest in maybe gold, silver, and copper of that sort because we're just spending so much money. The government is spending so much money we just simply don't have. And I think the president understands it, but at the same time, it's almost like jumping into quicksand. You don't know how to get out. You do have to spend on national defense. It's kind of as much as some people may think you can't get rid of Social Security and a lot of other things right at this particular time because you'll be letting your citizens down if you do that. But definitely, the increase of the national debt, I think, is his biggest failure.
I guess for me, because that's a big one, I would say healthcare reform. I think, and I don't know if that's necessarily pinned so much on him as much as it is on the Republicans in Congress, but I think that was also a major failure. I think they had a chance to, they'd been basically complaining for 8 years about the Obama policies and Obamacare and everything that went into that. And then they had their chance to essentially basically do whatever they wanted. I mean, they had control, so they could have done it, and they totally botched it. And so I think I don't know if that's necessarily something that you can directly attribute to Trump.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that's something that's kind of it's come to my mind time and time again, and I'm kind of like, all right, are you going to do something? Are you going to do something? And it's kind of, I think there was something in the works, and I honestly believe it was going to probably be done in his next term because they had so many other things on their plate. And also, I'm really not sure if Pelosi in the House would have worked with because the only thing I really saw.
Didn't they have control of both houses in the beginning?
Mm, no, no, no. Pelosi's been Speaker for quite some time.
Okay. I
Yeah,
clearly I'm wrong
it's
about
all right.
that.
No. It's all good. I'm pretty sure. it, you can fact check me, man. It's all good. Um, but yeah. The last uh, Pelosi has been Speaker for such a long time. Um, but the thing is, it's not just that. I think I agree with you in a sense that maybe they could have tried something. Just give and that is one thing I think President Trump kind of shied away from a little bit was healthcare. He tried to keep drug costs down and that sort, but there was just so many other things going on. I think one thing, say, no matter what happens, say, Sleepy Joe does get in. I think one thing that President Trump could do right now before it, if he were to leave office, before he leaves office. And I think it would be such a great thing for him to do is he could bring all of our troops home. That would leave a great mark and a great legacy on those 4 years. What a way to go. Let's bring our heroes home. I really think that is something that he can and should do. Now, is he going to do it? He's been talking about it. I hope he does.
So on that same note, who or what do you think his biggest accomplishment was or is during his presidency?
Man, it's so hard to pick one.
I mean, give me like the top two, top three. I mean, you can branch out.
Yeah, probably the top three would be immigration reform. With building the wall and cracking down at our border. No other president's done that like he has. And then definitely, I think criminal justice reform. All of these people doing these real long mandatory sentences for nonviolent offenses, they're given second chances. From someone that studied the criminal justice field while in school and gone around the world and done that, I think it really spoke real loudly for the kind of a guy he is. I don't think a lot of people expected him to do that. I think they thought, oh, he's the law and order president. He's got Rudy Giuliani in his corner. He's not gonna do anything like criminal justice reform. And then he did it, and I just thought that was magnificent. And then I think I really can't hold back on this one. Besides lowering taxes, which I think is great for the economy, especially now that we're kind of recovering from a pandemic, he has really strengthened the military, I think, better than we've ever seen it before. And people have kind of shrugged this off or maybe even laughed about it and thinking it's a joke. But Space Force, who would have thought? Who would have thought that we would be talking about something like a military branch, like associated with like NASA and going into outer space? I think President Trump thinks big. He thinks outside the box. And I think that's why he was so successful in his only 4 years. And I agree with him when he said, I've done more in my first term than Joe Biden has done 47 years as a career politician.
Well, I guess we've got an interesting almost 30, 40 days left till January 20th. So I don't know how this is going to play out. But my only hope at this point is that whichever way it goes, I hope it remains civil. I hope we don't see any craziness, and if we do, I hope it's very minimal and it ends quickly. But I want to thank you for coming on and sharing your thoughts with us. And I think people will watch this and at least have a better understanding. From the conservative view that you provide. I think it was insightful. And hopefully we don't get a ton of hate email because you're wearing a MAGA hat. But it is what it is, man. Right? That's your First Amendment right.
So a lot of people don't know this, but this was Ronald Reagan's slogan before it was Donald Trump's. When Reagan ran in, I don't know if it was 80 or 84. I'm usually pretty good with the history, but he said in his campaign slogans, in his posters, banners, stickers, "Let's make America great again." And the two things that Ronald Reagan and Donald Trump have in common are they were both on television. One reality TV star or businessman, and the other one an actor. But they were well known in everyone's living room when they turn on the TV. But when they go and they ran for president, they were very much criticized. But I think they're both going to go down as just not just magnificent presidents, but I think patriots. I think that's the important thing that we got to remember is sometimes we got to sit down with these guys, all their public policy issues, and say, hey, does this guy really love this country? Because every time I go to the polls to vote, that's the first thing I ask myself. Does this person love this country, this state, this city or community? And is he or she going to put the best interest of their citizens? And I think the answer is yes when you talk about President Trump. And I know a lot of people disagree, and that's okay. I'm always up for debate. But I really appreciate you having me, brother.
Yeah, man. I'll definitely have you on after we find out what happens, and then we can
Yeah.
talk about it from there and see where we're gonna go and kind of speculate and yeah, I gotta find somebody who has an opposing view, and then we can do a little trio here, and then we can kind of go back and forth, and I think that would be good, and I can moderate
A
sort of
little
like I
debating, huh?
moderated this one. Yeah, well,
I
not
love
so much a debate,
competition.
but like a long, yeah, I mean, I guess to some degree, like a long form debate, and I can sort of moderate it. And, because I like playing devil's advocate, and I like, I like sitting here and trying to spur on conversation. So, but yeah, man, thank you so much. And we'll be in touch, dude.
All right. Thank you,
Take,
sir. Have a good one.
take care, bro.